Okay.
Hello? Can you hear me?
It's working? No?
Somebody is on. The microphone is on.
Hello?
This one is not working yet? No. Can you hear me? Yes. 1, 2, 3. Yes.
Hello? Hello?
Yeah.
It's working.
Hello?
Mine is working. Mine was working. No, here.
Hi there, can you hear me? Go Berlin Geekettes, hi. Can you hear me? I can just use the mic. If this doesn't work, don't worry.
Oh yeah, get rid of it.
Yeah. Okay, good morning, Berlin.
I think you have to. What?
No.
I think you're not going to get it off there.
Hello, can you hear me? Okay. Okay, good morning. Can you hear me? Fantastic. Thanks for your patience with setting up. My name's Jess Erickson. I will be the moderator for the Berlin Geekettes panel this morning. I have some lovely women to introduce you to. So to my right, most of you just listened to Nicole Simon. She's a prominent podcaster and blogger in the tech scene. Say hi, Nicole.
Hi.
Next, I have here Joan, and she is a Ruby on Rails developer with Media Peers. Welcome, Joan. Hi. Then here I have Daniela, who is the co-founder of Changers.
Let's try this out. Hi.
And Carolyn from Etsy.
Hi, guys.
Hey. So, about 5 months ago, we formed a women in tech group here called Berlin Geekettes, which is why this panel is named after it. And we're really, really happy that Campus Party Europe allowed us to have a Women in Tech Day and to be fitted into this whole amazing event. So, today I'd like to talk a little bit about, what the current tech landscape looks like for women, the different opinions that we have on stage will be super interesting for you to listen to. And then at the end, we're going to open up the panel to some Q&A. So, there's kind of like this thing, why do we have women in tech conversations in the first place, right? Some people say it's a waste of time. Some people think it's really important to highlight. And I think it is important to have a discussion because we do want to encourage more women to join tech startups or, of course, found their own. And I can tell you that with the 5 of us on stage here, many of us had great opportunities in this community here in Berlin and worldwide. And I think a lot of women from Humboldt University, TU, or FU Berlin could all join this scene and start building and creating their own products. So why is it that there's so many small businesses and big businesses around the world founded and led by women, but very few involved in the tech scene? So I wanted to open up that question to the ladies just to warm up and say, why isn't there more women involved? What went wrong, or what can we do better?
Well, I can go first, but actually it's a very, very hard. Hello? Yeah, no. Actually, I can go first, but I think it's a very, very hard question we're having here because I think there is no answer. People don't know because, as Jess just pointed out, in other businesses, basically it works. I think perhaps these startup scene is kind of like this risky, fast-moving, where you kind of like have like sort of male attributes needed, and where women kind of like try to or are not that greedy, perhaps. I don't know. That's just an opinion. I really don't know.
I mean, when it comes to technology startups, I think one of the major problems has to do with how stereotypes and stereotype threat affect women entering the field of technology and where women see themselves as being able to be successful. Stereotype threat is the idea that just by talking about the stereotype of someone in a particular field, of a class that they fit into, like women or Asians or whatever, that you can then your performance will be affected by that stereotype, even if you don't believe it. It's been studied a lot with women in science and why there's a higher burnout rate of women in scientific fields like biology and physics and those sorts of things. They burn out at a much higher rate, and a lot of evidence is coming up that it's because of stereotype threat. So I think that has also something significant to do with women in the field of technology, programming in particular, and why we don't see more women there.
Yeah, no, there was a really interesting study done in the U.S. where they would have one group of women take a math or science test, and if they checked off their gender at the beginning, they typically did worse, and they'd have worse scores because it immediately placed this gender bias on their test. But for the controlled group of women who didn't have to check off the gender, they typically scored higher. So I think, yeah, there's a lot to be said about the way we're socialized to think as we're growing up.
I had the advantage of growing up in a family who actually mostly were strong women. And every time I get presented the question of how do we get more women to a conference or I'm, for example, ambassador for the stage, I usually never have an answer because I don't fall into that kind of stereotype. But do a test today very simply. If you're a woman or a guy, it doesn't really matter. If you talk in a group, try to observe how often women shut up if somebody else speaks. And how often guys don't shut up when somebody else speaks, but just, hey, I want to make a point or something. It's not something they do intentionally, but you will not really find me shutting up if I want to bring a point across. It's simple stuff like that. Women sit down very nicely and wait for somebody else to ask them to the dance. Everybody who's here should ask themselves, specifically the females, how many of you applied to speak on conferences? How many of you applied for positions specifically pointing out, hey, I'm a woman, I'm good for your quota? Many people don't do that, and afterwards they say, well, I see people on stage and it's so many men, or I see people in startup, or I see them in the press or whatever. I find most of the time that it's because the women don't show up, and if you ask them, hey, want to do an interview? They're like, oh, don't you have somebody else maybe? And oh, no, there is somebody over there. So in my case, I, for example, hate video, like whatever. If somebody asks me, can we do a video interview? The answer, first of all, is yes. Then it is what it is about, but it's never going to be, oh, can I find somebody else? Because if I'm in a business, if I want to present myself, part of that actually is to be able to speak up, present yourself, show yourself, have your cards with me, which I don't have today. But in often cases, it's not sitting back and waiting for something to happen, but make something happen. And you will be surprised how many people are looking for something where they can say women on there. It's just the women not filling the roles which are presented to them.
I think a really important issue is the idea of fear. And the idea, I think, especially with women, we talk a lot about finding your voice. I remember as a teenager thinking, like, I've already found my voice. I don't need to find my voice anymore. I have no problem speaking up and putting myself out there. But as I got older and progressed further in my career, when I first started out and I was an intern and I was doing stuff, it wasn't a problem. But suddenly, as I started to move further along, have more responsibility, suddenly being surrounded in a room with people who have MBAs, people who have 10, 15 years more experience, feeling that fear of, well, do I have enough experience? Do I have enough insight? Of course I did, and of course everybody does. Everyone should be able to voice their opinion and share that. And getting over that fear barrier, knowing that my opinion is also valuable and can help. Because I think we, especially in tech, it's a very monolithic culture. It's very, very ego-driven. It's very focused on billion-dollar exits. It's focused on, okay, who's going to have the next big thing? Who's going to get bought by Facebook? But tech can actually be a lot more diverse. Tech can be starting really small companies. It can be solving all different kinds of problems. So tech has the power to sort of to help solve some of the biggest issues of social justice around the world. And that means that it's going to be done in a huge number of ways, not just through making new social media apps. And we're only going to be able to do that if we have diversity in terms of what kind of ideas go into startups. If we only have the same kind of people, the same sort of A-type bullish personalities making a decision about what tech is going to be, it's going to be incredibly boring and flat. So it's important that you raise your voice, or that everyone raises their voice, that we do have a diversity of opinion and we make better products. It's going to make the tech scene better. And I think one thing that's really important to catch yourself doing, something that women do a lot, and there's a lot of studies about this, women will often qualify statements that they make. Something like, I may not be an expert in this, or I may be new to the company, or, I know that this is your field of expertise, but I'd like to say this. when you say things like that at the beginning of a sentence, you essentially tell people to stop listening to you. Because automatically they have a reason not to value your opinion, they have a reason not to listen to you. And that's something that I catch myself doing all the time. And it's just sort of socially embedded to sort of be polite, make sure you don't upset anyone, you don't want to rock the boat, you want everyone to be happy. And you just have to get to a point where you stop worrying about making people happy and doing what's best for the company, what's going to be best for the collective growth, what's going to bring more revenue and more success.
And that particular kind of qualification of, well, I'm not an expert, or generally underplaying your own expertise is something that's particularly insidious in interview situations, where men are, as you know, on the whole, more likely to overplay what they know and make a broad statement of, well, I worked with that technology one time back, 5 years ago, so yes, I can do that. I'm an expert in that. And women are much more likely to put very forward, well, I don't know that much about it. It's been a while since I used it, but I could maybe, and then they don't put enough focus on maybe I could pick it up again too.
I worked in support for some time, and there was a very simple distinction. If I only had a written text of what kind of support question would come in and not the voice, I could always tell if it's a guy or a woman. A guy would call and say, I didn't do anything, but it's broken. Because they played around, because they tried it out and couldn't fix it, so they finally had to call the support line. And especially because they knew I was the only one there to do their support, they also had to call a woman, which was bad. The women would, if at all, call and say, I had an idea, I thought I could maybe be doing it, but only if perhaps, and it was just an idea, but I didn't try it out. And as Caroline already said, you stop listening to that because they didn't do anything. Look around and ask yourself how many times already here, although they already know it, it was, I'm sorry, like Caroline, oh, I'm sorry to do that kind of stuff. This is what is presented very often by women because it's a traditional way of behavior. For the guys in the audience, if you find a woman doing that, tell her to stop doing that, especially if they're in a guy environment. Encourage them to be more brave. I have the different situation. I never had the situation where I was the shy one. I was always the outspoken one. There is flag against that as well. You get always, oh Nicole, you could be so much nicer. It's a qualifier from the other side. So if you're a guy or woman, encourage others to speak up.
That's great advice. I'm just snagging the microphone. No, but I really believe in the statement, you can't be what you can't see. And I wanted to ask the ladies if having a female role model when you were growing up had a deep impact, or if gender really matters at all in this, forming of the future and what you think you can do and what you believe you can do. Because I feel like, at least in the States, I'm coming from an American point of view, the more women that I see in the media that show that they have leadership roles and decision-making roles within the tech scene or in government really kind of tells me that I can do something like that someday. And I was wondering if you feel like role models play an important role.
I think there are 2 points. First of all, just seeing that there are more women able to do that. I think it's incredibly important to have role models. For me, one of the most important things in my childhood was I had a giant poster in my room of Smurfette, and it said, girls can do anything. And it sounds ridiculous, but that was actually incredibly important for me, being a young girl, every night going to my bedroom and seeing this poster, and it helped sort of boost sort of my confidence. I was always quite an outspoken young woman. But I think the other issue is it's not just seeing women in positions, but also seeing that leadership doesn't have to be Steve Jobs. Leadership doesn't have to be one kind of being the boss, taking care of everything. Leadership also means having a family. Leadership means not having a family. There's all different kinds of businesses. There's all different kinds of running those businesses. And finding a mentor who reflects the kind of person that you'd like to grow into is incredibly important because it's going to give you the strength, and it's also going to give you the freedom to say, I know that this is typically how people run businesses, but I think we can be successful this way.
I think actually that what Caroline just pointed out, it's very important to also have like a different kind of leadership to show that you don't need to have like this male approach. I think we are in corporate world, it's still a very male dominated culture and form of communication, and I think that women can bring like lots of profit to it, like benefit in ways of changing corporate culture. There are these studies actually that companies led by women do up to 20% more profit. So it's not only like a cozy kind of like, oh, everybody is feeling well thing, but it like really brings benefit to the company. On the one side, on the other side, I think that but I just had my point. Sorry. I'm just going to add it later. Sorry.
It matters. I think the distinction between role models of strong women and strong female role models in the field that you're looking into, because I would say that I did have strong female role models when I was growing up, but I certainly did not have any female role models in the technical field, and I didn't actually get into the technical field myself until about a year and a half ago. I was previously a professional stage manager for live theater, which is basically the opposite of programming, and is a lot more like project management for those of you who that might mean something to. And I got into coding because my husband actually is a programmer and would constantly give me brain teasers about programming and talk to me about his computer science classes and tell me, all these things. And he would say to me when I would finish talking about them, "You have such a great mind for programming. You should really learn to program." And ultimately, when I moved to Germany and had spent a year learning German and then had to find a job, I thought, rather than get a job to practice my German, maybe I'll learn programming and get a job that's actually fun and exciting. So I did that, and I managed to do that without having strong female role models in technology, but I think we should have more of them, because more strong female role models in a field where women are underrepresented helps with breaking that cycle of not having women in the field so women don't come into the field.
The home environment is also very relevant. I grew up in a family where, by definition, women worked, and the traditional model of housewife didn't really exist. There was a dishwasher, and meals are supposed to be done in like 30 minutes, and on the weekend you can do them longer. So my aunt was probably my biggest role model. She was a top manager, and when she come home, she would talk about what she would actually do. So I think the home environment has a huge impact how to encourage. I'm a firstborn child, also the firstborn for my grandparents, so I was indulged in my interest in anything technology, so that helped quite a lot to be around. So I was much more able to look forward to. I didn't have any kind of role models in the field I'm interested in, but I was confident enough in what I wanted to do that I never had any kind of problems with this specific. But I remember, as you said, American, the moment President Obama was elected, there was a lot of reporting of black people saying, "Oh, I actually can be a president," and that was obviously never on their mind to portray those role models. It can be also a guy. I remember a boss in the days when I worked in corporate. He was there. He was managing 1,000 people, and the area he was working in, suddenly one day he said, "I have to go at 4:30. I was like, "Why? You're a boss. You have to work." "Well, my wife is on her consulting gig, and I have duty with the kid, and the kid comes out of kindergarten at 5, so I have to leave at 4:30. He did it for half a year, and suddenly everybody started asking, the guys also, "Can I go home maybe earlier? Is it okay if I go back to my family?" Leadership from the top.
Women, because we have hellish hours. It is like this. If you have a small company running, normally you have to put lots of time in it, and it's still like this. I mean, people say it shouldn't be an issue, but actually it is. As a woman, if you want to have a sort of family life, it's getting really, really hard, or you're like an expert organizer. So it's a kind of really like compromises you have to do there, and I think like some women just like really choose not to do so and just choose against it. So I think in bigger corporations it's easier to do both, but if you want to kind of like raise up your own startup, I really use the word raise because it's like a kid you're raising. Yeah. It's at least as difficult as raising a child.
Yeah, I think there's an interesting thing in Sweden. I believe paternity leave is you have to take paternity leave or you can't, or you lose basically this great opportunity. And because of that, it shifted the idea about responsibility and having a child. So men are now taking the paternity leave because they essentially have to take this benefit. And it means that suddenly men feel a lot more ownership over the child-rearing process, and it's not solely a female job anymore, and that's incredibly important. I think also because there's obviously a lot of men at this conference as well, giving men, if men want to stay home and take care of children, more power to them. I think, we need to develop a tech culture that is open to that.
I mean, yes, and fortunately for people having families in Germany, you can share parental leave with maternity and paternity. One parent can take 12 months, or you can have 14 months between the two of you if the second parent takes at least 2 months, which I think is pretty great. But I think that success and having it all can mean, it can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. I'm fortunate enough to work at a startup that has reasonable hours because in spite of the fact that right now I'm the only woman working in the office, pretty much all of the other 8 or 10 guys who work there with me, they all have long-term partners and children themselves. So family actually is relevant to my whole company, and that's really, really lucky for me. I really like that. And success, ultimately in the long term, success might mean not that I'm making the most money ever, but that I have the kind of job where I can travel at will and spend half my year in Berlin and half my year in San Francisco or something like that. So.
You also have to make decisions, and sometimes, and women often get sidetracked by this, oh my god, I cannot have a family in a startup, but the reality is quite different. You also cannot have a hobby in your startup. If you want to have a 9-to-5 job and you want to go home at 5 o'clock and want to have your weekends off, you should not start working in a startup. It's not about family or having children, it's already about having a hobby. But sometimes the women only go, oh, it's so bad to work there. And I like to say, and I play devil's advocate today here, if you work in a startup and you have to work around the clock without really pushing out something really successful, it just means you need to hire somebody like her who's a professional stage manager and project management, because you're not capable enough of running your business. Running a successful business is not about working around the clock, but working properly and fitting to the cause. And then you also can fit in family when you, for example, say, well, we have people who have to leave, then you plan around it and have maybe more people. But that's a totally different story. When you have those stories about having success in a startup and you define for yourself, I'm more happy not having that stress level. It's a discussion in corporate many people have when they say, I could make a career. I could go for the next 3 or 4 steps, but that will mean so much more pressure. It will mean so much more payment, but also it's pain money, as we say in Germany. And there's several people who say, I don't want to do that. I don't want to have the added responsibility. I want to be able to go out in my garden. If there's sunshine out there, I want to be able to go out in this kind of specific. So success also is a definition. If I, for example, I was asked when I was 19, applying for an apprenticeship of 3 years, so when do you want to have kids? Not if, but when. And I said, ask me with 29 again, because I didn't want to have children. But I'm sure the reason I was picked for this apprenticeship of 3 years is because I said no to children. And that's something which shouldn't happen. And I bet with you, none of the other guys was asked, so when are you planning to be a father or anything like it? As long as these kind of discussions are in the mix, it's going to be difficult. And if women get sidetracked and fall for the trap of answering that, that's going to be strange. So encourage people and start working with your power for people who provide you an environment where you can work, where you have, for example, coffee and all the other stuff you want to have, and maybe the rooftop. I hear Berlin startups are judged by the fact if they have a rooftop or not. It can be such a simple thing, but you have to define it for yourself.
Yeah, success is work-life balance, in my opinion. It is not working around the clock. It's actually why I left stage management, is because I was working 12-hour days, 6 days a week, and my day off was Mondays, so I pretty much never saw my husband. I was unreasonable. It was not sustainable for me. I loved the work. I loved the people that I worked with, but it was not worth it in the long run. To me, it is much more important that I have a life than that I have any particular job.
Actually, that's quite interesting. There is a new shift in the generation growing up, which is actually taking work-life balance to a new level. So it's not only they often refuse to have a proper career in order to say, no, I don't want to work that much in order to get there, but I rather prefer to have my life, to have my hobbies, to have my friend, family, whatever. And so lawyers are having really troubles with the new people they're recruiting because they have to offer, they want to have good people, they have to offer theirs. And hospitals actually are also having completely shifting their working plans because new medicines are just refusing to go into this, I have to work for 14 hours and after that I have a 2-night shift.
I work for a company called Etsy, and Etsy is the world's largest marketplace for handmade goods. Essentially, you can buy something directly from the person who made it. We have 800,000 shops around the world. 75% of those are run by women. And what we discovered is a lot of these women start doing it because they're at home with children, don't have as much time, or they have a lot of time on their hands, and they also don't necessarily have as much of a sense of purpose anymore. They've been put into this role of, it's time for you to take care of the kids. And then they start to discover their passions and their creativity. Right. And of course, we're happy that they're making money. It's our goal to make our sellers as successful as possible. We've also found, as a lot of these women have found, a better sense of self-purpose, better sense of sort of pride in what they do. And I think that's something, whatever job you do, it needs to help you feel happier and sort of more whole. It's about work-life balance.
I mean, I think for some women, just having a job instead of just being at home raising the kids, even though I'm sure that they find that very important in its own way, having a job and bringing in some money can feel very fulfilling. I went through sort of a phase where between stage managing and starting to program, I wasn't bringing in any money. I was learning German, which is important in its own way, but I felt a lot better about myself once I was working again and doing something productive with my day, rather than just learning to speak the language and live in this country. So
being the wife, so basically. I don't know who of you actually had a look at Pinterest. Pinterest is very famously, that's where the women are, but if you look closer at it, it's something very specific. Guys, as I mentioned before, they play around with technology, and if you want to see a real crazy people where it makes you feel normal, go for the gamers in the back. So that really makes you feel normal. But Pinterest is a lot about women. No, it's awesome. It's like a different strange planet, and I love living on a different planet.
I play World of Warcraft. So.
Yeah, it's like there are women in there, and they do different things. But the women who there's predominantly women on Pinterest, like Etsy is a lot of stuff, and what there's a lot of people doing, women doing, is having blogs from home decoration, how to raise kids, and they share information between each other, and they're very successful. They go through a site like Pinterest where they show, this is how you make homemade jam, or this is how you make the stuff you can find on Etsy. This is I currently moving. I learned how to paint walls properly, how to set up something specific, how to thrift store something up. All these things where they can find their own worth has additional benefit when you go to their blogs. I internally scream about how not technology oriented they are, how they do all the stuff wrong, but they are happy, and that's the most important part. They have their blogs, they write about it, they make pretty pictures, and they earn money because they get sponsorships from all of these sites. They connect with one another, build a huge sphere of influence. They learn about how to do your own stuff in the backyard, and all this kind of stuff is really exciting and interesting, and it's different to, you're just a girl, you can't do anything. If you see some of the women there, what they do with the wiring or the decoration or renovation, it's awesome.
Okay, so I've been flagged and told we have 10 minutes left. I just have one last question, and then we'll open up to the audience. We need to get more women excited. We got to get women into the tech scene. Like Carolyn mentioned earlier, it will change the face of products and companies and the way people think about the world. My question for you, if you could each answer in 2 to 3 sentences, what would you do to get more women excited into joining tech or science fields today? Who wants to go first?
I'll go first and try to keep myself short here, I guess. One really huge important thing to do is to teach introductory technology classes to everyone at a level where they don't feel dumb asking questions. Harvey Mudd College changed their computer science introductory class that is mandatory for all first-year students. They changed that in 2005, and they saw a massive uptick in the number of women in computer science, and they also saw an uptick in the number of men in computer science, because there are also men who haven't been exposed to computer science before they entered college, and treating those people who were new to the field like they were okay and they didn't have to know all this stuff already made a lot more people stay interested.
I earned my living for years, and I will be earning my living for the decades to come by explaining stuff simple enough and provide the stepping stones. Nobody is stupid to understand this kind of stuff. Like, you could learn programming, although people say it's so complicated. It is not. None of this stuff really is complicated, but it needs to be explained in a way and given in a way that it's accessible. It needs to be, for example, when I look at Etsy, I see the stuff. I cannot start with doing the awesome stuff. I have to start start with the sewing machine, which stand, by the way, in the back there at the store, and learn how to sew, for example. It's something simple as that. It's the same with technology. We need simpler stepping stone, and you need to take the woman take her by the hand and force her to go to events like this, so she loses the fear, because women don't like to go out alone. They are always fearful to go, so bring them with you, force them, bribe them, whatever you do, push them in there, not just for the women events, but force them to the general events and say, you go there, and then they will figure out it's awesome.
I think everyone has a responsibility to nip bias in the butt. So what that means is every time you're in a meeting or you're in the kitchen of your office and someone says something that is not very cool, like a sexist comment, and I think it's not just sexism, we also need to get a variety of different ages in tech. Tech is really young. You should also, if you're getting a startup, you should try and hire some older people because they have a lot of valuable insight. If people say racist things, you shouldn't be afraid to call someone out on it. You don't need to chastise people. You don't need to say, I can't believe you just said that, how sexist is that? You can say something like, would you say that in front of your mom? And I think what's important is to engage people in conversations about this. I think a lot of, especially tech, because men are used to working with each other a lot, they don't realize what an impact their statements can have on other people. They don't realize that they can really intimidate people incredibly quickly. So not being afraid to stand up to them and engage them in a conversation. Try and get them to understand your viewpoint. I was the first product manager at SoundCloud, so I was managing a lot of male developers. And I went to the DLD Women Conference, and afterwards one of the developers asked me, well, why do women need their own conference? Isn't that kind of sexist? And that's a great question, but I firmly believe that there's a difference between separatism and solidarity. And having an opportunity for great women to work together is incredibly important. But after that, I realized that, wow, a lot of people don't really know sort of about feminism, so I gave a masterclass in the company, and in front of a room of about 65 guys, gave an hour-long talk on what feminism is, why all of the men in the room probably are feminists, they just don't know it yet, and what they can do to sort of help. So don't be afraid to stand up there. I was personally very frightened to do that, but afterwards it was unbelievable how many emails, how many people took me aside and were just like, wow, I didn't realize, I had no idea, thank you.
Yeah. And just to finish this, I think talking about role models, just be one. Just show women that it's absolutely possible, that go into mentoring, do as much as possible, communicate, sit on stage. For example, I had nothing to do with tech. I come from the art scenes, and now I'm sitting here on stage representing a startup which basically has built a hardware and solar hardware, etc. So it's like really about go and say it's possible.
Great. Thank you so much, ladies. Awesome advice. I'd like to open up now. We have about, I think, 5 minutes left, so we have room for about 2 to 3 questions in the audience. Anyone?
Hi. Hello? Okay. I was just thinking about, anytime I think about women in the workforce or just being a person in the workforce, thinking about the statistic that's like 70%. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Everybody, I think, is going.
My question is basically about the fact that the statistic that says that women make 70% less, or 70 cents on a dollar for every man that makes a dollar. So anyway, related to this, what could you possibly say about that? What are we supposed to do?
Well, I know that, for example, in Germany, women earn less because a lot of companies, this is totally malicious and it's illegal, but they calculate the risk of maternity leave into the salary before they think about hiring a woman. I would just say, ask for a lot of money. When you're negotiating salary, ask for a lot of money. You're worth it. And if they aren't willing to pay you what you want, don't take the job. Go find a company that will pay you what your worth is.
I worked in controlling for 8 years in a corporate structure, and I can simply answer that because the women didn't ask.
Exactly, that's what
The
I just
guys,
wanted to go.
the first thing is I'm new in sales. What new car do I get? What new office do I get? What do I get? What do I get? How much more can I get? The woman says, so what are you offering? Oh, that's fine, okay. The women didn't ask, and if you don't ask, you don't get, and this is why you get 70%. And the additional part of calculating, that might be there as well, but the women don't ask, and they are satisfied with what they are offered, They don't ask around, they don't exchange information, they don't test their worth. And they get intimidated by if guys especially tell them, oh, this is a lot of money. And then women will always go, yeah, well, maybe I can go a little bit further. I always have the discussion when I talk about my rates. So I can do something you can't do, so this is why you're paying me money. So yeah, I can get that cheaper. Awesome, go someplace else, buy. You have to ask for it, otherwise you will stay at the 70%. Is there a bias towards women? Yes, but the women are the same problem.
I have two comments, really. One is, as a female of an older generation working in tech for 25 years, we went through the threshold of you can have it all in your family and you can be the career woman and raise a family, which was a lie. But if you want to get to the career aspect, you have to look at managing not only your workplace, but you have to manage your home place. And a lot of my initial salary went to hiring au pairs and things like that in order to be able to function. Because once you're out of that job, you lose your career path, and your male counterparts will continue on their career path and reach the strategic level, which is where we need women at, is the strategic level, enforcing policy and change. And I'd also disagree with this fact that women aren't interested in technology. If you look at e-shopping, women are there in the thousands. If you look at Pinterest, if you look at Mumsnet, women will engage in technology that engages with them. And the problem is a lot of the male-dominant technology is just not interesting to women.
I mean, women are actually the dominant users of a huge number of technologies. In my talk at 6 o'clock tonight over on the developer stage, I actually have a list of this at the end of my talk, but it's at least a dozen different technologies that women are the main users of. Every social media, every social network except for LinkedIn, telephones, text messaging, everything. Like, women are huge users of this stuff, and in fact, not young women like me, but actually mostly women in their 40s, 50s,
30,
and 60s
35.
are huge users of these technologies, and people don't pay enough attention to that, and it's not being taken into account nearly often enough. And I think that if we can get some interesting new companies, developing products with that in mind, we will have an enormous. It'll make a big difference, and that's one of the reasons why we do need more diversity in the workforce as well.
So I think we're going to have to wrap it up. The mic is not working, but thank you so much for Gemma and